Right, good afternoon. I'm Robbie Talbot, and with me I've got Sarah Hill from Information Leadership. I'm from Aoraki Polytechnic, and for those of you that are not quite sure of where Aoraki is, it's actually based in Timaru, in the good old centre of the South Island. Our home area is mid and South Canterbury and North Otago. The area is also home to a number of notables, and I'm going to bring these back to you again shortly. And I'll take, for example, Colin Murdoch. Do you know who he was? He's invented the tranquiliser dart gun. Richard Pearce, who was treated as an eccentric. He worked in his little old farm shed and built an aircraft from scratch and possibly flew it before the Wright brothers. We also boast the birth of the jet boat, Richie McCaw and Phar Lap, all from South Canterbury. So it might be a small area, lots of beautiful scenery, but it's got some good ancestors there as well. Aoraki is a small regional polytechnic with about 160 full-time equivalents and just over 2,000 EFTs divided between our campuses that are based in Timaru, Ashburton and Oamaru, but we've also got Dunedin and Christchurch as well. A small team of 3.5 people supports the IT infrastructure, the 500 desktops and the services across all the 8 campuses. We have a strong Microsoft stack from the desktop to the server room and the back office, and now we're working on building the business intelligence dashboard to go with it. Like a lot of typical organisations, we have and have had a lot of shared drives and home drives that are full of files and documents. And these silos have presented a real challenge because of the limited visibility across the structure and the inability of the users to find easily what they are looking for. Files and copies of them were breeding like rabbits in the Mackenzie country. Then someone had the audacity to ask, which is the authoritative document? And when 4 people stuck up their mitts and said, hey, we've got it, then we knew we had to do something. And the Public Records Act, looming upon us too, knew that we had to do something.
So from our point of view, the challenge was slightly different. So Information Leadership started out 7 years ago as an information and knowledge management consultancy business. So back when we started, we didn't actually work with SharePoint. We worked with the other electronic document and records management products that really had a stranglehold in New Zealand up until when SharePoint came along. We got into SharePoint because our clients asked us to be there. And what we found out very quickly was that do-it-yourself was a bit of a minefield. So where we went in and helped a client and we gave them a couple of days here or a few days there, and they went off and then did their own things, sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And often what we saw and what we're still hearing about is how easily SharePoint goes feral. And yeah, and so we were particularly concerned with that not happening with the people that we worked with, but also particularly concerned about that from a compliance point of view. So one of our strengths, part of our background is on records management. We wanted to make sure that Aoraki and the other polytechs we worked with were actually going to end up Public Records Act compliant as well. The other thing we're well aware of because of our backgrounds is the number of EDRMS failures. I implemented my first EDRMS 10 years ago. Organisations around the country are littered with EDRMS failures. They struggle to get user adoption, struggle to deliver the return on investment that's promised. So for us this was really, really worrying when we started out on this path. And just how good really was the SharePoint option? Is it a case of just like sliced bread, compliance and it's ready to go? We didn't think so. And we thought the risk of this was actually really high. So for us, we thought it was particularly challenging to deliver enterprise-wide content management, to do it at a Public Records Act compliance level. The other thing that was really challenging for us in this is that Rob's talking from Aoraki Polytech, but between March and June of this year, we had 14 polytechs sign up with us, all to do SharePoint, enterprise content management, Public Records Act compliance. So we knew that this was the time for real innovation. And when you read the literature about innovation, it says innovation doesn't happen when you've got all the time and all the money in the world. Innovation actually happens when you're up against the wall.
So for us, I could see right from the start that it wasn't just going to be technology. The more important part that I could see was the fact that we had to get the users and the business on board. They had to get involved in the whole project. The software package just, installed just wasn't going to do it. And in fact, I basically refused to install SharePoint and let it go. The users and the business were not ready. You mentioned record keeping or business classification, and you just got some dumb looks. We decided to try a slightly different approach and created actually yet another shared drive. And the object of that was to be read-only for everybody and write-only for a few. And what we did there was pull in a lot of the academic information in, the reference documents were moved in, and a new sort of quasi-business structure was set up in there. Users started to let go of their files. Well, most of the users and most of the files anyway, but gradually most got the idea of working in with this shared resource. And they knew they could find things quickly, and they knew that when they had it there, it was an authoritative document. And it has got to the stage where people are, if it's not in the R drive, why isn't it? Where is it? Where can we get the answer? It was a good start, but it was not going to be sufficient for the Public Records Act compliance. But it was a good way of getting the people starting to think about letting go of their documents. SharePoint had been talked about at RACI because it fitted so nicely with our Microsoft stack. And last year the TEC, the Tertiary Education Commission, put up some seed money to get the independent tertiary providers, the Polytechs, to get underway with their PRA compliance. They would prefer, and they sort of stated that they'd prefer it to be a collaborative work with some of the ITPs, and collaboration was something that we as Polytechs had been pretty good at doing. We've got a student management system that's been born and is used by about 15 to 20 of us, and we've worked in other ways as well. Last year there was a sector-wide business classification system and a general disposal authority that had been finalised. The business was at last getting interested. The Tertiary Education Commission carrot and the Public Records Act stick provided a good combination to actually motivate executive to put the business case through. At the end of last year we ran an RFP, a request for a proposal, and we got a lot of good responses. Some of them were based on SharePoint, some on the proprietary document management systems, and one of the responses was from Information Leadership. They had been working alongside the ITPs doing the General Disposal Authority and the business classification, and they put forward their iWorkplace as a solution for our challenge.
So, as I mentioned, we come from an information and knowledge management background. So the kind of value proposition we put together for RACI wasn't just the technology. So we had the SharePoint technical piece for sure, but then we added to that core information design. What should the metadata look like? How do we translate the taxonomy into SharePoint? What about the retention and disposal rules? How do they translate? Added in that core record keeping piece, and also the change management and the training piece as well. So for us, and when you look at our business and the kind of people we have in the business, there's the technical bit over here, but there's a whole lot of other stuff that wraps around it. And then what we did was we actually codified this. So one of the reasons why we codified this was firstly because the ITPs wanted to collaborate and they wanted to work together, so they wanted some commonality in terms of what they got. They didn't want it to be different if they got business analyst David to if they got business analyst Helen. So they wanted consistency and commonality. Also for us, the reason why we codified it is because we're a relatively small business. We've got 16 people. And so we needed to make sure that each of those people who was working with a Polytech was actually working to the same standard and delivering the same thing. So clearly you've got Microsoft SharePoint, either 2007 or 2010. We're working with both in the Polytech sector and in other sectors. And on top of that, we've built iWorkplace features, which provides the hardcore Public Records Act stuff. And we've also built foundation design. And this is the design principles, the design choices that help guide an organisation towards a platform that's actually enterprise ready. And then we say, well, on top of that, for each of your different business activities, we can build you stuff, sure, or we're happy for you to build stuff. Because if you're building it on SharePoint and you're using the features and you're applying the foundation design principles, now we're pretty confident that you're going to be able to get it right. And to help you even further, we've got codified ways of delivering a business case, a roadmap, sorting out the governance and doing that information design. And we're not going to leave you hanging on the change side either. So change management has always been a very strong discipline of ours, and we've brought that through into our SharePoint company. And for the 14 Polytechs, this was starting to look quite attractive. We worked with each of them to establish a baseline. So that was, what should the program look like? So what does the overall program look like? What are the tactical things they want to deliver? What kind of support do they need? We visited all of them from Invercargill over to Te Rāwhiti over in Gisborne to actually work with the leadership. So where was the sponsor coming from? To actually socialise the kind of executive awareness and support that was going to be needed. We spent some time talking with them about their compliance drivers. What had they done already? Where were the gaps? And we also spent some time with them figuring out who were their existing partners and how were we going to work with them. So most of the Polytechs already had infrastructure partners in place. And we didn't want to take over that role unless they wanted us to. We wanted to come in and deliver enterprise-wide document and records management. So that was the first task, was to actually get together that baseline for each of them. And then there were a number of different choice points that they all had. So the first was, what kind of approach did they want? So some of them wanted turnkey. They just wanted plug and play, give us SharePoint like a document management system and we'll be happy. Others wanted us to work with their people so that their people could then deliver it. They've all got different levels of resourcing, and I don't mean that just in terms of staff numbers, but I also mean that in terms of skill sets. So we've walked into some Polytechs where they've got really, really strong people in the system architecture area, and we don't need to do a lot there. We walk into others and they've got really strong business analysts, and we don't need to fill that gap there. So really working with them around what kind of pieces did they want to cover and where did they want us to fill the gaps. Talking to them about priorities. So clearly they've all got a compliance driver, but some of them had different business priorities from others. So for some, their quality management system was a business priority. For others, getting their program management office up and running and sharing and collaborating was a priority. And then finally on infrastructure, again, lots of variation there. Some wanting to work on the cloud, some wanting to work on the other nearby Polytech servers, some wanting to work on existing servers, some having to buy new servers. So while I would think, every Polytech's the same as the next Polytech, they'd all think they're different and special, and the truth is somewhere in between that. And so then that baseline plus those options translates into a program of work. So there's some change management stuff, there's some iLabs, there's some training, there's some mentoring. There's infrastructure, there's either the server setup, or if the servers are already there, there's the installation of the iWorkplace features. There's information design, and I talked about how we've got an information design process. That's all plugged into what we call a design wiki, which takes an organisation through all of those design options for enterprise-wide document and records management. It then presets a number of metadata fields, a number of ways of working, and through our iWorkplace Foundation feature, packs that into SharePoint. And then there were a number of extra sorts of things that people wanted, like advice on migration, for example. They actually wanted to start running some retention and disposal. So from those previous options, building a program of work for each of those 14 polytechs, but recognising that each of these is a modular piece. So if Polytech wants an iLab on business discovery, which is the iLab for business users, then that's one iLab that's standard that we can deploy either to all the polytechs together or in-house for that particular polytech. If they want some help on migration, again, there's a standard process that we would take them through. So we're not having to invent things each time we go into a polytech, which for them drives down the cost and for us drives down the risk and the amount of training time it takes for our people. So what was that like, Rob?
Well, when we took a look at the iWorkplace, we thought it looked pretty good. Because it wasn't just a turnkey system, it actually gave us what we felt was what we wanted, and that was the ability to pick and choose a few grapes or cherries, whatever you want to call them, and over time build up our own skills. We put in place an internal project manager to run the project. This person had strong IT skills, came from a strong management background, but wasn't an IT person. Wasn't part of the IT team. I felt it was necessary to keep the project out there in the business rather than just another IT project. We actually visited the South Taranaki District Council and just saw how the information leadership methods had worked there so well. Users were involved in the design of their sites, and Chrissy, the floor walker, was given very strong support as the work areas and documents transitioned to SharePoint. And on our visit, we just sort of picked up on that, and it made us really think that this user support end, as the sites go live, and tailor-making the sites to individual teams or users, as the case may be, was a very, very strong point. And iWorkplace has worked at Aoraki too. The rollout of our initial business activities went very quickly and very smoothly, and the users are happy, and that's a real good thing. The success in the first couple of business areas has helped the business case to proceed forward to roll out the rest of the business studies. And in fact, what may actually happen is that we may not grow that internal capacity as much as we thought and rely more on information leadership to do the work for us. And we'll concentrate on that very important user support side. One of the things that we decided fairly on to do was to set up an information management group. It involved people from across the business, from the academic to the administrative, and it was so that they got to know about what was required out of the Public Records Act and what they're going to be needing to be doing to actually make the whole project work. The Public Records Act was a bit of a stick. The main driver, of course, was the improved business processes. The outcome we were going to hope for was that we'd have a work smarter and that it would be all good practice, and the PRA compliance was going to be just a nice little wee bit that came out of the end of it. One thing that we did do was to open up a SharePoint list for all the users and ask them to give their thoughts on possible names for our new site. We felt it was necessary to have a sort of a unique name that was based on Aoraki. So we did this in SharePoint. It was our little SharePoint sandpit. After a week, the list was closed. Users were able to vote then on the suggested names. I won't give you all the names that came out, but the interest is pretty high, and there's a generous meal voucher for the proposer of the name that was eventually selected. Some good names, for example, Paper, the project for Aoraki Polytechnic's electronic records, came out. We'd had a history of naming some of our file servers after previous CEOs, and so one person, had had a Herb and it had a Gary and some of the other names, and the CEO that had recently left us was Wendy, And somebody put on wonderful electronic and necessary documents, yahoo! Another one, the Aoraki Records search engine, we skipped over that one, and then come up with I retrieve information simply, the acronym being IRIS, and that's the one I've actually chosen to go with. The iWorkplace system has sold itself with the users and the business activities that have been converted. The fact that it's worked well, as I said before, has boosted the business case for funds to keep working with the additional business activities.
So part of the solution for us too around working with the likes of Aoraki where they've got limited money is to actually try and understand where the value in SharePoint for Aoraki will sit. And again, this applies to all of the polytechs that we're working with. And each of them has different funding envelopes. So for some, the funding envelope is this big. For others, it's quite a bit bigger. So really trying to understand where the value is. So in the first case, maybe an organisation's looking at File and Find Plus. So that's just a systematic way of actually filing and finding their records and documents. Then at the next level of the staircase, maybe they're looking at completeness. So they want to do not just electronic records, but also email. And again, what we find from the rest of our practice is that email is kind of like the red-headed stepchild of document management. It's often forgotten, mostly neglected. Organisations that have really good document and records management are often still struggling with the email dimension of that. Introducing consistency. So this is where, through the polytech sector, where they want to have the same way of doing things. So they want to all have the same type of QMS. They want to all have the same type of program management office. And then finally at the top, adding on some of the business process stuff, some of the exciting workflows, some of the info path, some of the custom dev that needs to happen. And I suppose what we do by putting that picture in front of a polytech, say, or another organisation, is it makes it quite clear to them what some of those choices are. If we don't do that, what happens is we go in with a mandate for enterprise-wide document and records management, and pretty soon someone over here is talking about, and can we do this flash whizzy thing, and can we do this bit? And you end up in 6 or 7 months and you've delivered the flash whizzy thing, but you actually haven't built the platform that's going to allow them to go enterprise-wide with document management. So that's the reason for presenting that value staircase.
So the designs that come out of this process are pretty flexible. While the users are involved in the designs for their business activity alongside the developer, the product rolled out is pretty well work ready, capable of making some small changes to suit those individual little groups. And the users have got this sense of involvement in where they're going. We're proposing to, with the value added, we can see pathways further forward now to involve InfoPath and really push the business processes through all of this. Back to you. It's me again. We've already established, as I said earlier on, that we didn't have the skills, and we still don't, internally to get the job done. The Zilch in-house, could we recruit? The initial idea was that let's get information leadership in for a while, but they're going to charge us heaps. We'll go out and employ somebody and build up our internal skills and just gradually take over and do it. It hasn't really happened. Because we've seen the value of what the system is doing for us. We think there's still a possibility for an opportunity for us to build our skills over time, and we will, but we're not reliant on it to get the project finished. We're going to get the project finished a lot sooner by involving more consultancy and more design alongside the information leadership developers. And until we've actually got suitable people in-house, and there's somebody out there might be quite interested and good at SharePoint, come and work in lovely Timaru. just send me your CV, we'll have a talk about it. But at this stage we're looking at depending on a bit more than what we originally intended to and using information leadership to develop our sites.
And so while obviously we're very keen to help our recce as much as they want us to, we're also really conscious of our size and we're conscious of the shortage of SharePoint skills out there. So one of the tactics that we've had right from the start is to recruit from the client, which doesn't mean we go off and we burgle Rob's staff.
There's none there.
There's none there. There's only 3.5 of them. But effectively what it means is that we've got a mission to turn Rob's staff into information leadership people. And so what we've done as part of this is we've built up a series of iLabs. And interestingly, as well as using these for our clients, these are also the iLabs that we use to train our own internal people. And we've got a philosophy of growing people rather than buying people. So we're often getting people in at that bottom end and really building them up. So the kind of things that we're delivering iLabs in, the business discovery, which I mentioned, which is for business owners in the organisation around what can SharePoint do. Information design, which is a 2-day iLab where we give away all of our templates, all of our intellectual property around how do you actually do information design well for SharePoint. Retention and disposal. So we've got a retention and disposal iWorkplace feature pack. It's an engine. It runs retention and disposal rules. How do you get your retention and disposal schedule? How do you take the rules inside that, translate those into the engine, and then get it to run and actually administer retention and disposal in an ongoing, controlled and managed way? Migration. So this is a big one for lots of organisations we work with. Their shared drives are a mess. What are the right strategies for migration? Rob mentioned Chrissy at South Taranaki. So this is floor walking. And this applies not just to SharePoint, but to every single document and records management implementation we've been involved in or we've seen, is that this is the difference that makes the difference. So if you've got a really good floor walker who's in there with your people day after day after day, talking to them, helping them figure out how to use the system, finding out what doesn't work for them, translating that back to the techies, that makes such a difference for a relatively low investment of money. And we actually train people in how to do this really well. And then the system architecture, and I'm not technical at all, but my technical guys tell me that if you don't set it up right from the start, then you're buying yourselves problems further down the track. So what the technical team teach in this system architecture iLab is how to set it up right from the start, and then what are the kind of regular maintenance things you should be doing that will keep things running. And then finally, we provide that mentoring and support. So we don't have a huge vested interest in staying in the client site for years and years and years. What we're really interested in is building an information leadership movement right across the country.
The iLabs, if you like, are a bit like a training buffet. You can pick and mix and eat as much as you want, or none at all. But what we're finding is, and what I can see happening is, that different individuals within the organisation that you hadn't even thought of actually step up and show an interest and actually gain some stuff out of these workshops. And they're actually good candidates for moving on and moving up through the system. So we've got the ability to pick and mix as much as we want. Some have been on site, but recently we sent people to an iLab, one of the information design iLabs, that was specifically for the ITP sector. I think there was about 8 different ITPs there, and it was a really good time, not just the information I got out of it, but because we're actually meeting and talking to the people who are actually doing the same things at the other polytechs. And I think that was half the gain from it was the actual learning, the other half was the beer time and the meal time in the evening. Just talking to these people, doing the same things what you're doing, talking about what things you're going to be doing next, and they're saying, okay, if you're going to do that, we think we'll do this, and then we'll swap designs. And that to us is really beneficial. Oh, stopping it going, Farrell. Information leadership have helped us set up a governance group. The idea is that we're going to have control over the sites and their lists, and that the ultimate control of the site is in charge, is invested in this governance group. Users and their designers can make smaller changes, but if the changes are more dramatic or could affect the system, let's put it to the governance group, just to keep that neat sort of box around it. The same applies when you start, especially if you start wanting to change some of the global type settings, and the other side of it is, if we can possibly do it, want to try and get away from using too much actual custom code in the system itself. Too many special little applications to run to make SharePoint work that much better. Where we can do it as much out of the box, that's what I want to try and achieve, because it's going to make upgrading and working with it easier later on. Yeah, things can go wrong.
So our solution to that, which I've alluded to already, is our design wiki. And again, this grew originally from an internal need that we had, where we had a number of business analysts, and we didn't want them, brilliant and marvellous as they are, to all be off doing SharePoint in different ways. So this is a documented approach to SharePoint design and governance. It's hundreds of pages big, and what we do is we workshop that through in a facilitated process with a particular organisation. So they've got a number of choice points that we workshop through. They've got a number of model answers for each of those choice points, and the pros and cons of going different ways. So it's very, very structured. And what we're trying to do here is to make sure that the decisions that are made early on don't preclude good enterprise design later. And so what you often happen where an organisation does SharePoint in an unstructured way is they do things at the start, and 12 months later they say, gosh, we wish we'd known that back then, and we would have done it in a different way. And the whole point of the design wiki is that we deliver a whole lot of that learning up front. The other thing that's quite a nice sort of side benefit of this is that if you're a public office or a local authority, then you have to comply with the Public Records Act, and there are mandatory standards that you have to comply with. One of the really interesting things about those mandatory standards is that compliance is actually documentation heavy. So you have to document a whole lot of decisions that you're making around record keeping. The really good news is that design wiki actually provides a whole lot of this documentation. So for example, the metadata standard requires you to document your metadata schema. Well, we provide for that in the design wiki. So there's a whole bucket of compliance stuff actually built in there. So that's really our solution to stopping SharePoint going feral, is to actually set the design choices out early, workshop it through in a very structured way, and provide that governance right up front. In practice, Rob, what's it like?
I think it's pretty good, because you're actually using SharePoint to prove your own point, and that's the fact of the documents are open, available to use. The whole basis of why some things have been decided to be done that way are there in the design wiki, and people coming along a little bit later can look at that, understand the reasoning for it, and then not blunder into something and make a big mistake. To me, the enterprise design is the use of the templates for the business activities. That's a very strong point. The templates have got the flexibility to suit user needs, but you've got the backup of that governance group when the changes sort of look as if they're going to get a bit too heavy. After all, the concept of the system that we're after is not only keeping it simple, but more importantly, it's to keep information searching simplified. The seed money from the Tertiary Education Commission got us started with a couple of business activities, and it's proven to us that we can do it, and that the SharePoint investment is well worthwhile. But to satisfy the demand for fresh activities from other users wanting the areas to be next, how can we do it? And this is where we've put a proposal back to information leadership to say, okay, we want to go ahead and do all our business activities and have it done by end of next year, say. Can you come through and work out a plan with us? But keeping in mind the whole collaborative approach that we're undertaking with the other polytechnics. simply because we don't have the knowledge and expertise on board, and we think it's actually better to probably purchase that expertise rather than employ it. There's actually a better chance for that person who's going to be working on it, or the team, to be working with other professionals and getting the most from it. In a normal vendor-client system, we'd have to pay the full development of each site. But with information leadership, what is the...
Well, we've come up with something different, sort of modelled on the iTunes App Store, and we call it the Design Bank, and that's our App Store. Basically, it's been built on strong collaboration in the Polytech sector, but it's now expanded out into other sectors. And what it means is that each organisation that's involved contributes a design. We standardise that design into a blueprint, and when you contribute to the design bank, you're then allowed to freely use any of the other designs that are in there. Now, for some of the stuff that's in there, that's going to be Polytechnic specific. So quality management system, if you're an insurance company, you're probably not going to want to use the design for a Polytechnic quality management system. But some of the other designs in there are much more generic. So, for example, one of the pieces of work that Aoraki did was on HR recruitment. So that design will go into the design bank, and any organisation working in this framework that wants to do HR recruitment, rather than starting from scratch and paying our BAs to come and do work from scratch or using their own people to do work from scratch, they can download that design blueprint and then just tailor it to fit their organisation. We've also wrapped around that a collaboration site that allows those people involved in the design bank to share ideas. So this is particularly important for the Polytechs who are all sort of going at about the same time, because what it means is they can say, hey, we're looking at doing this activity next, has anyone done it? Or don't do that activity next, we're going to do it. And so again, the reason for us in pulling this together was because we knew that the sector was so constrained in terms of cash. They were so constrained in terms of cash, the kind of money that they had, hardly any of them were going to get over the line in terms of going enterprise-wide if we did it a traditional vendor-client way. So we really needed a different model that allowed us to still make some money and run a business, but allowed them to really stretch their dollars hugely. And as Rob's mentioned, the shared training as well. So what sort of surprised us about this is, we just did the training as one of the things that we offer, but it's become a huge venue and opportunity in and of itself for the organisations that are all using the same methodology and the same approach to actually share what's working and what's not working. So really taken us by surprise. So this is, probably can't see this all that clearly, this is one of the blueprints from our design banks. This is for the QMS, and you can see there's some diagrams in here, and down at the bottom here are each of the chapters in terms of the design. So it goes into what sites, what libraries, what metadata do you need. It goes into the retention and disposal rules and how they get applied. So it's really a very, very detailed design spec. And as I say, all you need to do if you're part of this framework is you need to collaborate, you need to put your own design in, and then you get to use the other designs that are in there. We think it's pretty cool.
So for us, collaboration and practice is pretty good, because each ITP involved in the project has a range of business activities, obviously. But remember, though, that we're using a pretty standard business classification that's been developed between us. The work that was done in collaboration last year, they've all picked up on. One or two minor differences to suit the businesses, but by and large, it's very much identical. The intention is that we're going to be able to share site designs for business activities, as Sarah has said. We've done the HR recruitment and the policies and procedures, and we're making these available for the other ITPs on the collaboration site. They can use them as such, pick them up, copy our design exactly if they want to, or they can modify them for their own taste. But whatever happens, they'll be able to save a lot of expensive time not having to start from scratch for each business area. We'll pick up on other people's business areas. Any of the other Polytechs will be developing things at different times to us. We'll pick up and use their designs as appropriate. And we can time our own rollouts, as I said before, to pick up business activities used by them. So working together, the workload is shared an awful lot.
So takeaways from today, the value proposition is really around that whole iWorkplace ecosystem. So not just SharePoint technical, but being able to bring in the record keeping, the information design, and the whole change and training. Really franchising this to the customer, so building information leadership people actually in our customers. Thinking about that business value staircase to work out what to deliver and when. The enterprise design templates, which all use the same foundation, the same methodology, and then actually giving away the designs with the consent of those organisations that have been part of this process. So we think it's pretty unique and special. It's certainly driving down costs in the sector and getting them enterprise-wide document and records management. Thank you.
Has anybody got any burning questions? Yeah.
What business functions do you start off with?
We at RAACI started off with HR recruitment, as I said, and also the policies and procedures. Others have started off, Sarah, what were some of the others started off with?
Quality management systems, academic board, the whole sort of governance area, project management, program management. You name it, everyone's picked sort of a different 2 or 3.
What they figured was important to pick off, seen as, in some cases, let's do the hard one first and get out of the way, and others were doing, let's pick an easy little cherry and see if the system works, then we'll gradually work up to those real tough old nails out there in the academic departments. I'm not quite sure which approach we're going to have. I think the tough old nails might come a little bit sooner rather than at the end of it, but complete variation between the various ones that have been tried. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.